what the family dynamic was.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like if you're talking about a kid with a ceiling, the kid from the Four Lines team likely has more of a ceiling because he's had to deal with some measure of adversity. Maybe he likes it, maybe he doesn't, but in some way he's dealing with it. And conversely, when that other boy goes to a higher level and isn't maybe top six,
Yeah.
probably falls apart or has difficulty adjusting to that role, whereas the other kid has already that's already sort of been not taken care of but dealt with a bit for you.
Yeah.
It sounds like that kid has a higher ceiling, because I think we all know how confidence and confusion and, hey, I've never been in this situation before, can really set a kid back until they get that figured out.
Yeah, the coach of the kid on the four line he played in the National Hockey League. His father played pro hockey. They both played at the University of Minnesota. So, in fact, his dad was on the U.S. national team about 100 years ago, and scouted for Montreal for years. And so they've got, high quality coaches. And then I know the coach really well. And I was talking to him last night. He says, this is just a quality family. The parents don't interfere. His dad says, whatever the journey is what it's going to be. And he's happy. And I don't mean to be critical of the other side, but I know that world really well also, because I know so many families and kids that came out of that other school who again live, whose families, the parents are CEOs of, the largest private company in the world, and dad shows up in a Ferrari. And I was standing with a scout from Central Scouting watching him play a few years ago, this kid play. And I said, what do you think? He's pretty good. And he goes, yeah, but to your point, Peter, he doesn't have to play hockey. So when it gets tough, he won't.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I've sort of always remembered that. And he's a guy I respected. I coached against him in the USHL for 3 or 4 years, and he was a quality coach for sure. And I think he did a great job as a scout. So it's just interesting, the dynamics of looking at these kids and trying to figure out who's got upside and who's gonna flame out first and end up like us in beer league. It's just a point of win.
There you go.
Hey, Tom, thank you for sending me your stats, your passing stats. Those are good. I enjoyed those. So
yeah, I think that one mother does those. I think it tells you a lot if you want to look at who's passing, where shots are coming from, who's getting shots.
Yeah. Do you take the stats? You have somebody do it.
Oh, there's a mother sits in the stands and does it. And then she takes a picture of it, sends it to me after the period, and erases it and does the next period.
Oh, cool.
So I have the picture of it. So that's how I could send it to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Better
it.
than sheets of paper that you got to keep track of, eh?
Yeah.
Hell, I'd like to add that the particular mother is a very vocal one. And having her do that task has totally occupied her. She knows the game.
Yeah.
I've actually been in the stands and heard her shouting and coaching from the stands, and everything she's saying is good.
Yeah.
She knows her stuff, but this is a real good task for her, and Tom has put it to good use.
Yeah.
It's actually had a tremendous impact on how well the team is passing. The consciousness of the pass and the stats on a daily basis. It sort of correlates with what Cassie Campbell's mom, who came to the parent meeting we had, creating a mission statement, and she shared a story with Cassie growing up that most parents provide a loonie or a toonie in Canada, that's $1 or $2 for a goal. And she provided a loonie, $1 for assists. And she brought that point up at the parent meeting, and I think it's really a significant thing because their passing is unreal, but they still have players who go coast to coast and don't see open players and should pass but don't. And with all the skill developments going on, it's more one-on-one focused. And as Tom says, the game is 1-on-5. So now listen, with Tim on, the situation you described, you're recruiting, and there's one family that's very well-to-do that you're wondering about. The player may be spoon-fed and not have the intangibles that a middle-class kid might have, and a family with less. That makes sense. But I want to just mention that there are some players in the NHL like that who have been totally supported and been able to afford the best private help in the world, and they did get to the top. I don't know if it affected their character or not growing up, but I think we have to be careful. There's an awful lot of CEOs with quality values in their upbringing, and they don't get there without some degree of leadership acumen and values-driven things behind their motivation to succeed. So, it sounds like the choice to choose the kid that has the intangibles looks like a no-brainer, but sometimes I think we've got to be careful when we prejudge things based on that, and probably do a little more research, but I don't know. So can you let Tim know that situation again, Hal, just for our sake? Tim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. For some reason, my camera's not working today.
I like the hat, Tim.
Hal, your mic's off, Hal.
Well, he slipped off, but Peter, I wonder if you could describe the scenario of what he said, and with Tim here, maybe repeat your comment.
Okay, so what I'll try to paraphrase it, I guess, as best I can. He's got two recruits that he's looking at, and they come from different socioeconomic type backgrounds. One's very wealthy, goes to an expensive private school. The other is average working class family. The boy who plays on the expensive, more prep team, I think it is a kid who has a ton of points, but plays all the time. The team doesn't run four lines, whereas the other boy has, I think he said, similar point production, but that team rolls four lines. So the question was, which player should he take and why?
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
It does. I mean, it does. I mean, and it's funny, and maybe it's because, I am 66 years old, but I'll ask the question to the group. If you were stuck on a desert island and you had to pick one of those two kids, it was just you and him, which kid would you pick?
Yeah. Again, seems like a no-brainer. I'd take my chances with the less privileged kid. Obviously, hockey-wise, there's probably got to be a bit more of a difference, and be interesting to see. It depends what you're looking for. To help your team be the best it can. But with all things being equal, I don't think there's any question that I would prefer to take the less privileged kid. You're just more apt to have problems with maybe not the kid, but the parents of the more privileged kid.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the point I made was, I mean, I agree with you. And the big part of it for me was it doesn't sound like the kid who is the more privileged kid has had much to deal with as regards to adversity. And as you go higher up the totem pole, no matter how good you are, there's typically someone as good or better than you, so your role might change. And if you're not used to being in a situation where you do play a 4 lines and you get your opportunities, and you make the most of them when you get them, you just get them. That might be really difficult for that player mentally to develop in that type of situation. But that's the reality of what happens, right? I mean, who knows better than you, right? When you were in that world.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it sounds like, it's kind of funny to characterize them as less privileged and more privileged, but that's, but yeah, it sounds like, that player already has the baked in, to some degree, hopefully accepts the team value of using 4 lines, and it just points to less problems in that area, where you could have significant problems with the other player, even if he was playing well and you didn't give him as much ice as he used to, or if you get to a point where he's not playing well, you have to reduce his ice, then you're way more apt to have problems, I would say, with the more privileged player. And like you said, it just seems like a total no-brainer to me.
Yeah, right. And depending on what situation you go to, what team you go to, right? Like you might have a kid like that. Maybe he's got a really high-end skill set, and the coach says, I love your anticipation, your IQ, your skill set. You're going to kill penalties for me because." And then, well, wait a minute. I'm always been on the power play. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Tim, I just wanted to ask Jordan and Tom, I don't know that we've experienced, I know by working at the private school Edge in Calgary, we had a boy on our team, Tim, whose parents were American with absolute character. I'm sure he had to be pretty well to do to be in the Edge program because it costs a lot of money, but absolute quality kid and quality parents. And of course, we developed everybody and played all the lines, so we had no problems. But I'm curious, Jordan and Tom, in your coaching, have you experienced this dilemma of, and I'm sure some of those people with a lot of money have donated to the school with expectations of ice time for their kid, and that is another struggle. And I know, Jordan, you've experienced pressure of that type, and I'm just not sure whether it was families that were more well-to-do or less well-to-do. So, Jordan, can you comment on that?
Well, I think that part of it, Wally, comes back to, well, we're talking about character. You're hearing character thrown around here, and character is something that's built over time, and I know that there's adversity was something that Peter said that I clung to there, that if a player or a person does not handle adversity or has never faced adversity, that's where we would run into trouble. It doesn't matter what economic background they come from. I work in a very socioeconomic diverse school, in that there's people coming from multi-million-dollar homes on the lake to ones that are renting homes and are brand new Canadians. So it's comes down to whether the parents allow their children to handle challenges themselves, or they take them all away. And child psychologist Dr. Alex Russell talked about that with what he said his American colleagues called them snowplow parents, where parents push everything out of the way. But he said, I call them Zamboni parents, because not only do they take all the obstacles away, but they also leave the path behind them pristine. So it's the whole idea that instead of preparing the child for the path, we prepare the path for the child now, and in many ways. And so that's where I find this to be a little bit interesting, in that on the female side of the game, there are girls that'll get all the way, well, and on the male side too, to some extent, they'll get all the way up to U15, U18 AAA hockey and never have felt adversity, never been released from a team. And depending on the coaching that they've received, like you said, Peter, they may be getting preferential ice time. And so then it's onto a coach that has to put them through some of that adversity or some of that pressure that they have never felt before. And if they're not prepared for it, it's going to implode. And you know that their parents, if they've never allowed their child to be challenged, they're not going to be very supportive either. So that's the bigger question, and it's a hard thing to figure out, is what resiliency these kids will have and what resiliency their parents will let them have, so or have helped them to build. So it's a much bigger question as to whether they're going to be a great center or a good D or whatever. It's going back to that character thing that Peter was first talking about there. So I don't know whether I answered your question, Wally, but I think that it's something that I know in the last couple of years of my coaching that I've looked at more and more, is how the players interact with one another at camp, and what character pieces. Are they cheating drills? Are they doing everything that's asked of them? And I think that tells me a lot more in many ways.
And we should probably put the disclaimer in that, you know, we're not saying that every kid who comes from a kind of privileged background is going to be a problem, nor are all the parents going to be problems, as Wally pointed out. And the vice versa is true. Just because you maybe come from a lower economic background, you know, plenty of those kids have struggles of their own, and as do the parents. I mean, we're just talking generalities here, and really the answer for Hal is he probably needs to interview the kids and the parents and figure out, get a sense of, you know, what the better package is for his group. Because, you know, you really shouldn't assume one thing or the other just because of where they come from. We all know that's really not wise, really, if you're trying to do the best thing.
Yeah, and it works both ways, right? There's
Yeah.
there's a fit for that player and his family, as well as the fit for the team that he's going to, or he or she are going to.
Yeah, like for instance, if I don't know if Hal's listening, like if he did sit down with the parents and the player, both groups, both sides, and said to them, hey, here's how I operate. I like to use 4 lines, and if you're not playing well, and you used to be on the power play, but if you're not playing well, you might not be on the power play, might put somebody else in there. You know, I mean, you know, it's possible that both sets would say, no, we don't want that. But it's also possible that one of the sets of parents and players would say, yeah, you know what, we don't like that. You know, our kid's a great player and he needs to be on the power play. And there's your answer right there.
Tim, I put my hand up because Hal is working with a team in the BC Hockey League, and he's talking about 2 players that are being recruited for the junior program there. So it's not that the coach doesn't have a philosophy, or Hal would do the interview, but the information he's gathering, and I think the conversations to be had, there's sort of a third party in here, and Hal's just sort of a scout making a recommendation with, as he mentioned, players with very good statistics. And he did, as you said, Tim, made assumptions that the wealth of the one family and the kids, that particular player might have gotten more ice time. But I think I'd really want to identify the facts of that first. And I go back to the ed school experience, and Hal, you've missed about 15 minutes. I don't know if you were on, but it was all about your topic, and I'll edit it for you and send it back to you. But both Tim and I worked at a prep school here where, you know, I think 30,000 Canadians the cost, and there are really good players from wealthy families who can afford to put kids in the program. And I know one in particular that I coached. The U of C owned a number of dealerships car dealerships across Canada. Quality character guy. Daughter was a captain on the team and totally supportive of doing things the right way. In fact, was frustrated with the way that particular coach shortened the bench and didn't hold people accountable for behaviors. A very wealthy family, but definitely one that supported the cause. So, Tim, with Hellback on, I think it's, you know, you might be able to summarize what you've said related to a caution about decision making here.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, Hal, and you know, on the surface, it looks like a no-brainer. You know, generally speaking, you know, the more working class kid is more likely to have good values, and if he's used to adversity, he's used to playing on a four-line team, it seems like a no-brainer. But the bottom line is, for me, and I would want this of any scout that I'm looking for, if you're going to recommend a player, you know, maybe you just need to have a chat with both groups and say, hey, here's our coach. This is what his philosophy is. This is how he works. Like, he likes to use four lines. He likes to find rules for people. If you're used to being on the power play, that's fine. But if you're not playing well, then somebody else might be on the power play. And, you know, you might find one of the sets of parents say, no, our kid needs to be on the power play, like, blah, 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 blah. So they might make the decision for you. But, and again, there's the sort of the preface that, you know, just because someone's from a more privileged background or a less privileged background doesn't dictate whether they're good people, bad people, problem people, or whatever. So that alone is not really enough to, you know, sort of make the decision on. You know, it'd be good for you to have a quick conversation with both of them and just see how they react, because that might answer your question. I think that's kind of a summary of.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of piggyback on that because with again, I was high level prep school for 11 years, and we always made the parents a part of the conversation. Just because, you know, the best way, old saying, right, the best way to end a marriage is when you start it. You make sure you try to get everything out. Like, it's okay to disagree, right? It's okay to be in different camps if it works for you. That's why when you go to the parking lot and you go shopping, there's not black and white Chevrolets. There's every color car, every brand, because everybody wants something a little different. It's the key, like Tim is saying, is trying to find people that will be on the same page, because that not only makes the team better, but at the end of the day, it makes you better as a scout, because if there is any nonsense, you're the guy that's going to hear about, why did you recommend this kid? Right. So you yourself, a bit of a conversation. So at least you're feeling good about that, and that you're confident in your choice and how you can back it up, the best you can back it up. And I think that's all great information.
Hey, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Speaking on that, excuse me, I brought in a player at SAIT, and I asked a guy I knew from Vancouver about her character and all this kind of stuff, and he said good, and she just caused so many problems. I talked to one of the players who was an affiliate with that team, and she said, "Oh, I came on the team and she was yelling at me on the bench, and a little bit bugged with that guy for telling me that she was salt of the earth person." So you got to watch that as to make sure you don't recommend someone that's going to be a pain in the rear for
you. The other issue we've got down here is because the NCAA decided that, you know, to keep amateur status, you can't have an agent, but you can have an advisor. and it created a
Yeah.
whole
What a
network
joke.
of people who are charging like $8,000 a year to be the family advisor. And a lot of these guys don't really have much hockey experience from, or limited that I can tell. And then they've got a stable of 20 players that are paying them $8,000 a year. And so the one kid came highly recommended. I don't know by who, but I'm sure it's his family advisor is shopping him around to junior teams around, in North America. So I got to find out more about that also. And I don't have any problem going over and talking to the kid and hooking up. We have talked to the parents of the kid, the other kid that plays on 4 lines, and it's we'll have to go through that before we get very
Yeah,
far.
The parents
It's an awful
are,
lot of work to bring 1 or 2 kids up onto it.
the parents are probably a bit less of an issue if you're sending the kids up to trail to play junior. I mean, it would be more the kids themselves. But you get a sense of the kids, obviously, if you talk to the parents. But, when there's that much distance between them, they can still cause problems. But since they're not in-house talking to all the other parents every game, then they're less of an issue than if you're talking about a prep school team where the parents all drink coffee and beer together 4 times a week.
I just
All those
want to
safety
mention
meetings.
Yeah.
how, and this is probably more from movies and good coaches. I'm talking college football coaches recruiting. I don't know how many movies where the coaches actually visit the family. And based on the interaction with the parents and the quality of life of the family, that becomes sort of the crux of their recruiting. Now, it's a little different being a scout, but homework has got to be vital. And I think every one of us has been guilty of not doing the homework. And I know every one of us, and Jordan's encountered it. He's listened to good advice, but hasn't taken it because he thought he could deal with that particular player or family, and it did backfire. So I think getting to know the family, and whether it's movies or reality, the fact is the respect the kid shows towards the family, and it's evident in a visitation in terms of the interaction. And I'm not sure if a scout has the ability or freedom to arrange that kind of a thing. But I know as a head college recruit, where you're talking big dollars and cents, in some cases, they're flying those kids in and spending $100,000 on the family coming in to be recruited. And the perspective of trying to buy that player and the expectations of the family once they're there, I question the recruitment process relative to the delivery process of what they are going to develop relative to team or individual conflicts that occur. And Hal, when you began, you were describing situations with your club team at your school that are far more serious than this. They're important. This is important, but the fact that there's another lawsuit on another issue, those kind of things are occurring at the community level where these are still kids under 18 and parents are involved, and I don't believe money's involved.
Right.
But the upbringing and the expectations of what is your program about, and the philosophy and the understanding of where you're going with what you're doing, and not being able to do it. That's basically what's happening. You're just, your hair's going to get grayer, and pretty soon you're going to lose it. So that to me, it is the issue. But the question you asked, I'm not sure, like Tim said, it sounds like a no-brainer, but doing the research is important. And just like doing the mission statement is important.
Yep.
How does the parents raising the family, bringing up the kid in terms of their expectations, how they're going to be treated? Are they going to be entitled, or are they going to earn what they deserve?
Right.
And the other way you can obviously do it, Hal, is just say to the GM in Trail, hey, there's two kids here. They're both similar type players. They're both good players. They both can produce. And then let them do the interviews, because in some ways that would be better if the coach had, coach had a conversation with both of them about how he likes to coach and everything else. So you're not boxing him in or putting him in a spot he doesn't want to be in by saying something that maybe doesn't truly reflect how he coaches. So, I mean, that's sort of a good way to go too.
Well, I think I'm going to, with the kid that's playing on the 4 lines, I just sent his coach a note with the link to the Trails spring camp in April. And we talked about that last night, and I said, would he be willing to go up there and, and go up and skate for a couple of days and see the place and talk to the coaches? And he said, yeah, he probably would. I said, well, that to me makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah.
I don't think the coach, they're still playing. They're going to be playing for another month probably, and they're in second to the last place. So there's a lot of angst, and but we'll do the same thing with the other kid if I can track down. I want to track down his advisor and see who he's working with and have a conversation there. And I do know the coach, but the coach and I don't see eye to eye about things.
And if he's not willing to go, then there's your answer right there.
Yeah, I think that's, and they have another camp out east, so they don't have to go to Trail. They could go out east, and if that doesn't suit them to go skate, and see what it's like, then they can go to the USHL or go somewhere else and see what it's like. So great, this is fun. I enjoyed the ideas and the thought process, and we'll go from there. So,
Peter,
go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna ask Hal, do you have a good rapport relationship with the Trail coach in regards to the type of kid he looks for? I'm not talking about talent and that, because that's probably easy. Like the type of kid that fits their culture.
Probably not. The owner of the team is a friend. I know I'm my coach's son. But they're up in Trail and I'm here. The owner lives in Florida and in Trail. Although he has a house here, but he's not here very much. And we've had some meetings, and I interact mostly with the assistant coach, who's the head of, looking for high end, aren't we all? We're looking for high end impact forwards that can score goals and solid, and 1 or 2 more solid D. And so I have met some kids that played up there, and they love it. They thought the whole environment was great. This was unsolicited. I just ran into them in a coffee shop, and I was wearing my Trail hat, and their eyes just lit up, and we chatted. And they're sort of mid-level D1 players. They've bounced around since they left juniors, but they couldn't say enough good things about it. So no,
yeah, and that's right. That finding that kind of kid, because also there's that piece for that player, a culture shock, right? Depending upon what the geography setup is in Trail compared to if you live in the Gold Coast of Connecticut, we'll say,
Yeah, lots of kids aren't used to having to work in a coal mine as their part-time jobs.
Yeah, that's true. And And
Well, I always-
occasionally sleeping indoors for good behavior.
Listen, I want to mention a real situation, female hockey, same scenario. And I advised the parents at the time to do their homework before they choose a school the daughter was going to, Division I, NCAA. And of course, out here, just being invited is almost, well, where can I sign? And the girl was a national team U18 player here, very talented. Tom coached her. She went down there with high expectations. The philosophy of the coach was the veterans played the power play and special teams, and she was a first-year player, and so she didn't get much ice time relative to special teams. And she was one of those players who, when she was in Bantam before Tom coached her in midget, she was entitled by the coach in that minor hockey system and played to the point of being injured and played injured. And as a result, had to do about 3 months of rehab in the off season. So mentally, she went in with expectations. She entered a school that had a philosophy of coaching where the power plays were given to the older experienced players. I'm not sure if it's more talented or not. I didn't question that. But they have to do the research too, and they didn't. And so the school's program folded. It started again. The girl returned to Canada to play in the University League here in Calgary, and everything's fine. But they go through life making choices, and the choices, they're making a choice too. And they have to do their research on that coach, how he's going to coach, relative to how they've been coached, and what the expectations are. I think it's just being honest and upfront, so that trust and respect can be the underlying, modus operandum for everyone.
All good.